Please be seated.
Assalamu alaikum. Ladies and gentlemen, may peace and blessings of God be upon you. We will now start the formal programme for the National Peace Symposium 2018. A quick announcement before we begin that there's fire exits in this building are to my right and the left and on the two doors on the side here. Could I also make a request that no mobile phone filming to be taken during the proceedings? We will now start the programme with the recitation of the Holy Quran by Abdul Salam and the translation in English by Mubashir Ahmed Zafri.
Assalamu alaikum. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم أذن للذين يقاتلون بأنهم ظلموا وإن الله على نصرهم لقدير الذين أخرجوا من ديارهم بغير حق إلا أن يقولوا ربنا الله ولولا دفع الله الناس بعضهم ببعض لهدمت صوامع وبيع وصلوات ومساجد يذكر فيها اسم وَلَيَنْصُرَنَّ اللَّهُ مَنْ يَنْصُرُهُ إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَقَوِيٌّ عَزِيزٌ.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Peace and blessings of Allah be upon you. The selected portion of the Holy Quran that has been recited before you is from Surah Al-Hajj, chapter 22, verses 40 and 41. The English translation of the recited verses is as follows. I seek refuge with Allah from Satan the accursed. In the name of Allah, the most gracious, ever merciful. Permission to fight is given to those against whom war is made because they have been wronged, and Allah indeed has power to help them. Those who have been driven out from their homes unjustly only because they said, Our Lord is Allah, and if Allah did not repel some men by means of others, there would surely have been pulled down cloisters and churches and synagogues and mosques, wherein the name of Allah is oft commemorated. And Allah will surely help one who helps him. Allah is indeed powerful, mighty. Jazakallah.
I would now like to invite Mr. Rafiq Hayat, the National President of the Ahmadiyya Muslim Community UK, to give the welcome remarks. Mr. Rafiq Hayat.
A'udhu billahi minash shaitani rajim. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Most beloved Hazur, respected parliamentarians, worshipful mayors, your excellencies, lords, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. May peace and blessings of Allah be upon you all. It gives me great honor and privilege to welcome you to the 15th National Peace Symposium that is being held on the theme of the fundamentals of establishing lasting peace. Recent events have shown that humanity stands in dire need for peace. In the past year, the ongoing conflict in the Middle East and the relentless destruction of homes and cities in Yemen, Iraq and Syria, and the barrage of human rights abuses across the world has yet again highlighted the scale of the challenge facing the world. Seeing pictures of children looking for their deceased parents, hospitals being bombed, and children starving in man-made famine showcases the heart-wrenching state of affairs around the globe. It is estimated that 8.4 million children in Syria alone have been affected by the conflict, and whilst 22 million children are in dire need of humanitarian assistance in Yemen. Innocent children who are suffering only because their life is seen as a bargaining chip in the global race for the accumulation of wealth and power. It is on their faces that one sees the cold, harsh reality of war, the harsh reality of a world that condones murder, be it by bomb, bullet, or billion-dollar deals. Thus, today, more than ever, we must engage in the quest of establishing lasting peace, not only in these regions, but across the world. Here in the UK, we have also seen the spillover of international extremism through the radicalization of people and the rise of hate ideologies. The notion of us versus them sows the seeds of division rather than unity. Our message to all who spread hate is clear. Extremism and terrorism will not succeed, and that though means of cohesion and unity, we will defeat it. I can assure you that the Ahmadiyya Muslim community will continue to play its part in promotion of peace. Our founder, Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, peace be upon him, whom we accept as the promised Messiah and Mahdi, came with a clear mission to revive the true teaching of Islam, to reject the concept of violent jihad, and to rejuvenate the link between man and God. The community is now established in more than 207 countries, and our work is inspired by our Khalifa, His Holiness Hazrat Mirza Masroor Ahmad. We are truly honored that he has joined us this evening and will deliver the keynote address. He has addressed parliaments across the world, including Westminster, the European Parliament, Capitol Hill, amongst many. His Holiness is a man of peace who has repeatedly called for greater justice at every level of society. Under His Holiness' wise leadership, the Ahmadiyya Muslim community has instigated global campaigns for peace, which is the true essence of Islam and indeed of all faiths. Once again, I welcome you again on this very cold evening, and some of our guests, unfortunately from the north, were not able to join us because of the snow. But I'd like to welcome you all and hope that today we can work together and guide the world from conflict to cohesion. Thank you very much.
We have a number of honoured guests with us this evening, and time would not permit all of them to speak, and I would like to pay acknowledgement to some of those, in particular Mr. Mustafa Abdul Hamid, who's the Minister of State in Ghana, the Right Honourable Chris Grayling MP, who's the Secretary of State for Transport, Lord Ahmed of Wimbledon, the Foreign Office Minister for the UN and Human Rights, Baroness Emma Nicholson of Winterbourne, the Right Honourable Tom Brake MP, Paul Scully MP, Sir Edward Davey MP, Right Honourable Dominic Grieve MP, and also we have a number of representatives from various boroughs across the UK, Councillor Marcy Skeet, the Mayor of Merton, Councillor Leslie MacDonald, the Mayor of Wandsworth, Councillor Simon Woodruff, the Mayor of Ealing, Councillor Ifti Chaudhry, the Mayor of Runnymede, Councillor Tony Battle, the Mayor of Coleshill Town Council, and Councillor Liz Frost, the Mayor of Epsom and Ewell Borough Council. And we also have representatives from the Welsh Assembly, the Foreign Office and the Metropolitan Police. We would like to now invite a couple of our guest speakers to address the Peace Symposium, and I would like to first introduce our first speaker, Dr. Erin Rhodes, who is the President of the Forum for Religious Freedom in Europe. Dr. Rhodes is a good friend of the community and has spoken at a number of our events, most recently at the United Nations in Geneva. And he is a passionate servant of human rights and the cause of peace and social harmony. I'd like to invite Dr. Erin Rhodes.
Thank you very much for your very kind introduction. Your Holiness, members of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, and other friends. It is an honor to address you because as a campaigner for human rights and religious freedom, I deeply admire your principles of equality, freedom, and respect, and your commitment to tolerance and social peace. But I am gravely worried about the situation of Ahmadi Muslims in Pakistan and other countries. You are a community being punished for your moral and social achievements. You insist on political freedom for all, but are denied the right to vote and other citizens' rights unless you forsake your most cherished sacred vows. New legislation aims at permanently denying Ahmadis their most fundamental political rights. You stand for the rule of law, but endure murder, torture, and discrimination, as perpetrators enjoy impunity and are encouraged and protected by state authorities. You believe in religious freedom, but are denied the right to profess your faith and risk prosecution if you defend yourselves. You want to live alongside those of other confessions in mutual respect, but you are demonized, ostracized, and marginalized. No one can accept a new high court ruling that would exclude Ahmadi Muslims from serving their country, encourage more mob violence, and add to their burden of insecurity. We appeal to the government to stand for human rights and challenge this ruling. You know, it's just appalling what is happening in Pakistan when even in the parliament itself, hate speech and incitement to violence is voiced against the Ahmadi community. And unfortunately, there has not been very much political outcry against this around the world. Our job as human rights defenders is to not simply criticize state authorities. We are there to assist the state to abide by its international human rights communities. Along with members of the International Human Rights Committee and other human rights defenders, I have seen these things myself. We have looked into the eyes of families whose loved ones have been murdered, whose clever children are pushed down in school. We have heard the heartbreaking testimonies of women who are excluded from normal social activities, all because they want to follow their conscience. And I'd like to draw your attention to a report which is available to anyone who, we have many, many copies here available to anyone who wishes to take one. This is the report about our fact-finding mission last year, in which we spoke to about 200 or 300 people and got, I think, quite a clear and objective picture of what's going on. But my friends, I want to tell you, a noose is tightening around the neck of the Ahmadi Muslim community in Pakistan. 4 million people are at risk. Refugees from this frightful situation languish in Thailand and Malaysia, waiting to be accepted by countries where they can find security. United Nations human rights authorities and a number of national governments confirm what we are saying, and your problems are not unknown around the world, and you have much political support. Many are insisting that the Ahmadis need international protection, but it will not happen if member states look the other way. So let me use this occasion to implore anyone with governmental power and influence here today, use your leverage to support and protect the human rights of these people who themselves uphold human rights principles. Because if they are allowed to be murdered and abused, our own standards and values will be exposed as empty rhetoric. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next speaker has travelled all the way from Italy to be with us this evening. Dr. Luigi De Salvia is the Vice President of the World Conference of Religions for Peace in Europe. He is also a doctor, a lecturer, and has a passion for interreligious dialogue. And in 2008, together with medical colleagues, he founded an association focusing on interreligious cooperation in medicine. He is also a lecturer at the Faculty of Philosophy at the University of Rome. Dr. Luigi is a close friend of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community in Italy, and we welcome him on his first visit to the National Peace Symposium, and I invite him to say a few words. Dr. Luigi De Salvia.
Your Holiness, Excellencies, distinguished guests, dear friends of Ahmadiyya Muslim community, it's a pleasure and an honor for me to address you on behalf of Religions for Peace Europe. This symposium you organize annually since 15 years is one of the most important meetings in our continent. It's dedicated to reflection on risks and commitment related to the common good par excellence, the peace, in its concrete meaning of sustainable and possibly harmonious coexistence. We all are conscious of the delicate phase Europe is crossing due to several factors, both historical and emerging: immigration, arrival of refugees, high tensions in international relations, terrorism, sectarianism, etc. What to do in this climate of poor trust, latent desperation, and increasing fears? Can we take care of these fragilities, both personal and systemic? As people of faith, prayer, and meditation, we have a particular resource in facing adversities and witnessing hope. This resource is, in my perception, one of the most important of the fundamentals of establishing lasting peace, the title of this symposium. Indeed, our commitment to justice and peace is a visible sign of gratitude for the gift of spiritual trust we received. Some words on our movement. Religions for Peace Europe is an active regional network of religious organizations and people of faith and goodwill, inspired by the call to uphold the rights and dignity of every person as the most effective path to peace. As Religions for Peace Europe, we are part of the global network Religions for Peace International, born in Kyoto, Japan, in 1970. Our activities are projected and carried forward by national structures as chapters and interreligious councils. We have here, in this beautiful gathering, our Ahmadiyya friends actively committed both in Belgium and in Italy in Religions for Peace. They are wonderful persons who give a precious service in fostering interreligious dialogue and cooperation. Last, but most important, in this special occasion, I want to express all our fraternal solidarity to the members of Ahmadiyya Muslim community, victims of persecution, perpetrated by religious extremists who cannot tolerate and hate your interpretation of Islam, inspired to respect of sacrality of life and to non-violence. We will be always at your side in defending religious freedom of expression. Thank you, beloved friends, for your authentic, strong testimony of peace and love. God bless you. God bless our friendship.
Thank you. At the event this evening, we have attendees from 27 countries around the world, as well as representatives of various diplomatic posts in the UK. And I would like to just pay acknowledgement to those embassies that are represented this evening from Honduras, Kosovo, Sri Lanka, Iraq, India, the United States of America, Canada, Japan, and Pakistan. And on the second page of the list, I also overlooked to mention and acknowledge the presence of a couple of dear friends of ours, the Right Honourable Justine Greening MP, former Secretary of State for Education, Stephen Alambritis, who's the leader of Merton Council, and Max Hill, who is the independent reviewer of counter-terrorism legislation. Ladies and gentlemen, we now have the presentation of the Ahmadiyya Muslim Prize for the Advancement of Peace that is awarded each year, and I would like to invite Mr. Rafiq Hayat to introduce the winner of the prize. Mr. Rafiq Hayat.
The Ahmadiyya Muslim Prize for Advancement of Peace is presented by the community to an individual or an organization for their services to peace. This will be our 9th award for the deserving candidates, and this year we're honored to award the work of Dr. Leonard Rochelle, who is a distinguished pediatrician from Moscow. Dr. Rochelle is also an expert for the World Health Organization and the chairman of international charity fund to help children in disaster and wars. Dr. Rochelle has been leading the emergency surgery and children's trauma department of Moscow's Pediatric Scientific Research Institute since 1981. In 2003, he took over Moscow's Institute for Children's Emergency Service, emergency surgery, which is currently treating 60,000 children a year. Dr. Rochelle ensures that all children should get medical help for free, and his international emergency teams help children across the world and has assisted at sites of natural disasters and conflicts in Egypt, Japan, Georgia, California, India, Palestine, Afghanistan, and Turkey, as well as in combat zones in Romania, Yugoslavia, Georgia, Armenia, Azerbaijan, Israel, and Chechnya. Dr. Rochelle is critical of all governments downplaying the casualty numbers in conflict and is a promoter of human rights. He holds a professor degree and has authorized over 200 scientific papers and 7 books. He's also the chairman of the World Association for Disaster and Emergency Medicine and member of the Human Rights Commission under the President of Russia Federation. Dr. Rochelle has been recognized for his work, including the Order of Courage, Russian of the Year, and Doctor of the World. We are honored to award him the Ahmadiyya Muslim Peace Prize for the advancement of peace, and Dr. Rochelle's pressing duties meant he could not attend in person tonight, but his personal representative and international director, Ms. Angelina Axlikia, has traveled all the way from Moscow to receive the award on behalf of Dr. Rochelle. I would now request His Holiness to kindly present this award on behalf of Dr. Rochelle.
Thank you. Yes, please.
Dr. Rochelle couldn't join us, but he has sent a video message which will now be played to the convention.
Ladies and gentlemen, I am not a young man anymore, but I am not too old either. Over the years, I had time to reflect on different religions and their impact on the life of humans. And what was my conclusion? I have arrived to the following simple idea. There are no bad religions. Each religion is good in its nature. Unfortunately, there are individuals who abuse religion in order to achieve their own goals. It is important that religions should unite, but we see the opposite today. Instead of bringing people together, they divide them. Even those belonging to the same religion generally may be found to war against each other. I cannot comprehend the current state of affairs when Sunnis and Shias kill each other. When fellow believers in Gaza and Palestine fail to find common ground, or Catholics and Protestants being at odds with each other. Sadly, I could continue with these examples. It is not good. Naturally, top figures of each religious group have a significant impact More peacefulness is needed. Doing good is necessary. We must eradicate evil. We must eliminate hatred that spoils relationships. There is a need for religions to become kind, and instead of separating people, to facilitate understanding between them. I wish you health and prosperity. May the Lord be with you.
Dr. Rochelle's representative, Ms. Angelina Alexieva, has travelled all the way from Moscow to be with us this evening, and I would invite her to say a few words. Ms. Angelina Alexieva.
Your Holiness, members of Ahmadiyya Muslim community, ladies and gentlemen. Unfortunately, Dr. Rochelle could not be present at the ceremony today, and he asked me to say some kind words to you. Thank you for awarding him his prize of Ahmadiyya Muslim Prize for the Advancement of Peace. A person who really deserves it. It's very important for everybody to make every possible efforts to strengthen worldwide peace in his own way. As you have heard, journalists of the world called him children's doctor of the world, and it's true, because his idea was to help injured children, victims at national and technological disasters, at war conflicts, at terroristic acts, to help them in the best way. And his idea was to send at the site of disaster, specialists in pediatrics to help children, because in most cases, such help is provided by adult specialists, and it's a difference. So, as statistics has shown later, he was right. And with such an approach, when a mobile team of pediatric specialists arrives at the site of disaster, when many children are injured, their work helps to significantly reduce mortality and mobility rate, disability, rate of amputations in limbs, amputation of limbs in children. And you understand how important it is for the growing person. Dr. Rochelle and his mobile team were in many countries of the world, and where different nations, people of different religions live. And his guiding idea is to provide medical aid to children victims, irrespective of political or religious views of their parents. From time to time, he was on both sides of the conflict area, like, for example, in Caucasus, in Middle East, in Yugoslavia, and in other countries. Sometimes even he was imprisoned by one side of this. Dr. Rochelle is a devoted opposer to war and stands up for peaceful coexistence of different people and religions in the world. Dr. Rochelle has come to the decision to hand his award to a charitable fund which helps children with severe consequences of brain traumas and spinal traumas. In conclusion, allow me to wish you, on behalf of Dr. Rochelle, Your Holiness, you all present here, good health and prosperity. Thank you.
We now have the keynote address for the evening, and it gives me great honour to invite His Holiness Hazrat Mirza Masroor Ahmad to deliver the keynote address.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. In the name of Allah, the gracious, ever merciful. All distinguished guests, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Peace and blessing of Allah be upon you all. First of all, I would like to thank all of our guests for joining us here at our annual Peace Symposium. For the past 15 years, the Ahmadiyya Muslim community has been organizing and hosting this Peace Symposium for the sake of promoting world peace. Perhaps some of you may question the benefit of us organizing this event each year, given that the peace of the world, both in Muslim countries and elsewhere, has not improved at all during this time. Rather, it has deteriorated. Much of the world has been gripped by increasing division, hate, and injustice. Society has become polarized, wars have taken place, nations have threatened one another, and inequality has intensified in both the developing and the developed world. Given this situation, your question is quite valid. However, our faith demands us to try to urge all people in all parts of the world, whether rich or poor, whether powerful or oppressed, whether religious or irreligious, towards peace and justice. Hence, we will continue to play our role in making mankind realize its duty towards respecting and honoring basic human values. The core teaching of Islam are to fulfill the rights of our Creator and to fulfill the rights of our fellow human beings. With these brief words of introduction, I now wish to take this opportunity to speak about some matters that I consider to be of great importance in these turbulent times. In today's world, we often see the major powers and international institutions make schemes or plans that are aimed at bettering the lives of people around the world. In recent times, one of the issues that many politicians and intellectuals have debated and campaigned about is climate change, and specifically a reduction in carbon emissions. Certainly, striving to protect the environment and to look after our planet is an extremely precious and noble cause. Yet, at the same time, the developed world, and especially the world's leaders, should also realize that there are other issues that must be tackled with the same urgency. People living in the world's poorest nations do not concern themselves with the environment or the latest figures on carbon emissions. Rather, they wake up each day wondering if they will be able to feed their children. Their economic plight is truly desperate, and their poverty levels are far beyond our comprehension. For example, there are numerous countries where the majority of citizens do not have access to clean drinking water and are forced to survive by using dirty pond water to fulfill their basic needs. Even that too is not easily available. Rather, women and children have to travel each day for miles on end to collect water for their families, which they carry home in big vessels balanced on their heads. We must not consider such hardship as other people's problems. Instead, we must realize that the result of such poverty has severe implications for the wider world and directly affect global peace and security. The fact that children have no option but to spend their days collecting water for their families means that they are unable to go to school or to attain any form of education. They are stuck in a vicious cycle of illiteracy and poverty that is seemingly endless and hugely damaging to society. Today, their poverty and hardship is compounded by modern technology, through which even people living in war-torn or deprived parts of the world are able to see the comfort with which people in developed countries are living and the opportunities that exist for them. Witnessing the great disparity in their circumstances compared to others is cultivating further agitation amongst the local people, and these frustrations are being preyed upon by extremists who entice the impoverished with financial reward and by promising a better life for their families. Similarly, the targeting of illiterate youth means that the extremists have free rein to radicalize and brainwash them. The extremists take advantage of the fact that the rulers of those countries have more often than not failed their people. Most regrettably, the ruling classes in war-torn or deprived nations are more concerned about preserving their own status and power than helping alleviate the suffering of their people. The result is that those who have nothing come to view their own corrupt leaders with contempt and see the world's major powers as the enemy. Tragically, we are seeing the horrific effects of this in Muslim countries as well. And it is after observing the desperate state of their countries of origin that some Muslims brought up in the developed world have been radicalized and have perpetrated horrendous terrorist attacks here in the West. Hence, I firmly believe that if we truly wish to protect our world and to ensure we leave behind a legacy of opportunity for those who follow us, it is essential that every effort is made to raise the standards of the developing world. Poor nations must not be looked down upon. Rather, we should consider them as part of our family, our brothers and sisters. By helping the developing nations stand on their own feet and by giving their people opportunities and hope, we will actually be helping ourselves and safeguarding the future of the world. Otherwise, we are already seeing that the poverty and destitution in the developing world is negatively affecting the rest of the world as well. Furthermore, as a result of recent terrorist attacks and widespread immigration to the West, there has also been a dangerous rise in nationalism in many Western countries, evoking fears of the dark days of the past. It is particularly disturbing that far-right groups have become increasingly vocal and have seen their membership rise and have even made political gains. They too are extremists who seek to poison Western society by inciting the masses against those who have a different color of skin or who hold different beliefs. In addition, the rhetoric of certain powerful world leaders has become increasingly nationalistic and belligerent, as they have pledged to put the rights of their own citizens above all others. I do not dispute the fact that it is the responsibility of the governments and leaders to look after their own people and to protect their interests. Certainly, as long as the leaders act with justice and do not infringe upon the rights of others, attempts to better the lives of their citizens is a great virtue. However, politicians are based upon the policies that are based upon selfishness, greed, and a readiness to forfeit the rights of others are wrong and a means of sowing discord and division in the world. Moving on, another issue is the international arms trade. Today, the world considers itself far more civilized than at any time in the past. Yet, in 2018, there are countries that are being demolished and annihilated by weapons that can only be categorized as inhumane. In countries like Syria, Iraq, and Yemen, government forces, rebels, and terrorist organizations are fighting one another. Despite their divergent interests, they all have one thing in common, that the vast majority of their weapons have been produced externally in the developed world. Quite openly and proudly, the major powers are trading arms that are being used to kill, maim, and brutalize innocent people. Regrettably, such nations are focused only on attempts to boost their economy and to maximize their nation's capital without pausing for thought at the consequences. They desperately seek to attain the largest possible contracts to sell destructive weapons that, once fired, do not distinguish between the innocent and the guilty. They proudly sell weapons that make no exceptions for children, women, or infirm. They shamelessly sell weapons that engulf and obliterate towns and cities indiscriminately, whilst the economies of the selling countries may attain short-term benefit, their hands are covered in the blood of hundreds of thousands of people. Countless children are seeing their parents being killed in the most inhumane fashion, and all they can do is wonder why their parents have been taken away from them. Thousands of women are left widowed, hopeless, and vulnerable. What good can come of such devastation? All I see is a generation of children being pushed into the arms of those who seek to destroy the peace of the world. When a young child or a teenager sees their parents taken away from them in the most barbaric way, who can blame them for reacting? I mentioned before that extremists target those immersed in poverty, and they are also targeting those children or youths who have been brutalized by war. They recruit such youngsters in the knowledge that their minds are not yet mature and are easily manipulated into seeking bloody revenge through terrorism. Instead of being in school, getting an education so that they grow into decent, law-abiding citizens, the only education an entire generation of children is getting is how to master grenades or rocket launchers, how to do suicide attacks, and how to wreak havoc in the world. Moreover, some countries are unnecessarily involving themselves in conflicts taking place thousands of miles away by deploying their own soldiers or by pounding foreign lands with airstrikes. In many instances, it seems that the world has not learned from its past mistakes. It is widely accepted that the Iraq War of 2003 was unjust and based on false pretenses, whilst Libya has descended into chaos and become a hotbed of extremism since Western powers took action there some years ago. Despite this, big powers have not learned a lesson from this. Cities and towns have been razed to the ground. Thousands of buildings have reverted to dust. At the beginning, I mentioned that a major focus of the international community is climate change and a desire to keep the air that we breathe clean. Is there anyone who thinks that heavy bombardment has no effect on the atmosphere? Furthermore, if peace ever does prevail in the war-torn countries, their towns and cities will have to be rebuilt from scratch. And this in itself will be a huge industry that will cause an increase in harmful emissions and pollution. Thus, on the one hand, we are trying to save the planet, yet, with the other hand, we are senselessly destroying it. In light of all this, I firmly believe that world powers are being blinded by short-sightedness and tunnel vision. One of the main arguments made by those in favor of the arms industry is that procuring weapons is a means of deterrence and keeping the peace. However, we only have to switch on our televisions and watch the news for a minute to see that such arguments are misleading and patently false. Certainly, the thousands of innocent children who have lost their parents or have lost their own limbs will never be convinced by such logic. Nor will the thousands of women who have been left widowed or the millions of people who have been displaced from their homes. If we are to leave behind a legacy of hope for our children, and bequeath a peaceful world to our future generations. We, irrespective of our religion or beliefs, need to urgently change our priorities. Instead of being consumed by materialism and a desire for power, every nation, whether rich or poor, must prioritize the peace and security of the entire world above all else. Instead of embarking on an arms race leading to death and destruction, we must join the race to save and protect humanity. Instead of shutting down borders and ports in warring countries, causing for innocent children to be left starving and the sick being deprived of medical treatment, we must open our hearts to one another, knock down the walls that divide us, feed the hungry, and help those who are suffering. In terms of political rivalries, the dispute between the United States and North Korea continues to threaten the peace of the world, and any conflict between the two would also severely impact countries like South Korea, China, and Japan. Whilst it is being said in the past few days that there has been a breakthrough because the President of the United States has suddenly indicated the willingness to meet the North Korean leader, still there are no guarantees that peace will prevail. It is not even clear under what conditions they would meet or where and when such a meeting would take place. Even if a deal emerges, God only knows how long it will last, as there is a great deal of hatred entrenched on both sides. The Iran nuclear deal of a few years ago is a case in point, whereby a negotiated agreement was reached between Iran and the West. But now, just a few years later, the deal hangs by a thread. Hence, there are many issues that are precariously hovering just under the surface, and any one of them could erupt at any time, and the consequences do not bear thinking about. However, Islam teaches that peace can only be achieved when all traces of ill will and malice are removed from a person's heart and replaced by a spirit of mercy, love, and compassion for others. Islam is often branded an extremist religion that incites violence, and it is also alleged that large number of Muslims are disloyal to their countries or seek to spread disorder within society. However, I consider such allegations to be false and unjust. Even though so-called Muslim terrorists claim to act in Islam's name, I do not believe that we are witnessing a religious war. Rather, the wars being fought and atrocities being committed are only geopolitical gains. For geopolitical gains. The so-called jihadi terrorists and extremist clerics serve only to tarnish the name of Islam and undermine the efforts of the vast majority of Muslims who are peaceful and law-abiding citizens. Unquestionably, from the outset, Islam has rejected all forms of extremism, and the verses of the Holy Quran recited earlier tonight provide clear proof of this. These verses tell us that the early Islamic wars were fought in order to protect all religions and preserve the sacred principle of freedom of belief. The verses categorically mention churches, synagogues, temples, and mosques to be saved. This is a point I have made repeatedly, and I reiterate that anyone who violates the universal values of freedom of belief and freedom of conscience is far removed from Islam. Even within the Western media, there are publications that are accepting this, and I commend them for standing up for truth and justice. For example, a column was recently published in The Guardian in which the author writes, "The Muslim terrorism was never, and I would argue, still is not about furthering Islam. It was almost always about land rights, theft of natural and economic resources, and global monetary policies that left entire population in Muslim countries living in deprivation and destitution." These words accurately portray the reality of terrorism conducted by so-called Muslims. Furthermore, in a column published in a national newspaper, the journalist Peter Auburn provides compelling evidence that a significant number of Muslims are being radicalized, at least to some extent, as a result of the interference of certain Western intelligence agencies. In this regard, the journalist quotes a former British intelligence officer who says, "It is not right that, on one hand, domestic police services are straining every sinew to protect our societies by fighting terrorism, while, on the other hand, elements in our and America's security services have been arming and training jihadists and colluding in terrorism." Furthermore, in an article published by the Boston Globe, Professor Jeffrey Sachs, director of the Center for Sustainable Development of Columbia University, states, "The CIA toppled governments in the Middle East on countless occasions. Media pundits tended to overlook the U.S. role in this instability." Speaking in favor of multilateral, peaceful solution to conflict, Professor Sachs writes, "The United States should immediately end its fighting in the Middle East and turn to UN-based diplomacy for real solution and security." There are many other columns published in recent times by non-Muslims that substantiate the fact that terrorist groups such as Daesh could not have thrived without external support. I am not saying that it is always wrong to intervene, but any action must be fair and proportionate, and self-interest must be set aside. Chapter 49, verse 10 of the Holy Quran states that the objective of any intervention should always be establishing long-lasting peace, and instructs Muslims to be just even with their adversaries. Thus, where Islam gave permission as a last resort to the early Muslims to fight a defensive war, it also instructed them to fulfill the requirements of justice and to never be swayed by vested interests or to transgress once peace was established. Certainly, this profound principle is just as beneficial today, both for Muslims and non-Muslims alike, that where force is required to stop an aggressor from inflicting cruelty, the action must remain proportionate and never enter the realm of seeking revenge or plundering the wealth of the vanquished. Once the aggressor returns to peace, they should not be deprived of their rights or taken advantage of in any way. Throughout his life, the Prophet of Islam, peace and blessing of Allah be upon him, sought to bring people together in peace and was never ready to forsake his own rights in favor of others. He was ever ready to forsake his rights, his own rights, in favor of others. Many non-Muslim writers and academics who have carefully studied Islam attest to the fact that the Holy Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessing of Allah be upon him, sought to unite communities and championed freedom of belief. For example, Peter Frank Copan, a senior research fellow at the University of Oxford, has mentioned the Holy Prophet, peace and blessing of Allah be upon him, in his book, The Silk Roads. The author explained how the Holy Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessing of Allah, sought interfaith harmony and dialogue and worked closely with the Christian and Jewish communities of the time. He speaks of the common ground between the religious communities in that era and of how the message of the Holy Prophet, peace and blessing of Allah be upon him, was one of conciliation. In one passage, the author refers to the period when Prophet of Islam, peace and blessing of Allah be upon him, was appointed as the administrative leader of the city of Medina. He writes, leading Jews in the town Medina pledged their support to Muhammad in return for guarantees of mutual defense. These were laid out in a formal documents that stated that their own faith and their possessions would be respected now and in the future by Muslims. He further writes, Muhammad, peace be upon him, and his followers went to great lengths to assuage the fears of Jews and Christians as Muslim control expanded. Thus, the truth is that Islam has always been diametrically opposed to any form of terrorism or extremism. Furthermore, whilst I accept that the evil acts of some Muslims have greatly damaged society, I do not accept that it is only Muslims who are to blame for the volatility of today's world. Many commentators and experts are now openly saying that certain non-Muslim powers and groups have also played a role in undermining peace and social cohesion. Suffice to say that now is the time that humanity distanced itself from the notion that only Muslims are to blame for the problems in the world. Furthermore, it is also high time that instead of prioritizing the advance of their political parties or governments, our leaders prioritize the future peace and prosperity of humanity. This is the way to bring about true peace in the world. At a broader international level, we must recognize the fact that force rarely leads to any long-term benefit. Thus, when dealing with North Korea, Iran, or any other country, the major powers should proceed with caution and wisdom and endeavor to listen to the concerns of each party. As one columnist I quoted mentioned, world powers should pursue diplomacy and prioritize a de-escalation in tensions. They should strive to negotiate peace deals and agreements that are not biased in favor of one side, but that address the concerns of all sides. Furthermore, once peace is achieved, we should let go of any past enmities or hatred and march forward together with the spirit of mutual respect and regard. Certainly, it is my firm conviction and belief that the single greatest example of forgiveness, benevolence, and mercy in the history of mankind is the blessed example of the founder of Islam, the Holy Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. For 13 years, he and his followers were subjected to the most brutal persecution imaginable and were driven out of their homes and forced to migrate from the city of Mecca. During that period, the Muslims were brutally martyred, physically and mentally tortured, and subjected to the harshest possible social deprivation. Muslims were forced to lie directly upon burning coals for long periods. Muslim women had their legs tied to different camels that were then made to run in opposing directions, literally wrenching their bodies into two separate parts. Yet, when the Holy Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, returned victoriously to Mecca, he did not take a single drop of blood in revenge. Rather, according to the command of Allah, the Almighty, he proclaimed that all of his tormentors and all those who had violently opposed Islam were to be instantly forgiven. He declared that under Islamic rule, all people would be free to practice their own religions and beliefs without any interference or cause for fear. His only condition was that each member of society remained committed to peace. He instructed that all people, no matter their caste, creed, or color, were to have their rights protected and be treated with respect at all times. This was the timeless and magnificent example of the Prophet of Islam, peace and blessing of Allah be upon him. And it is this spirit of compassion, grace, and mercy that Muslims and non-Muslims need to adopt in the world today. It is this spirit of forgiveness and benevolence that all nations, whether large or small, rich or poor, need to develop. Only then will long-term peace be attainable. With all my heart, I pray that mankind comes to recognize its duties to one another so that those who follow us remember us with pride and gratitude. Let us look to tomorrow and not just today. Let us save our future generation. May Allah grant us wisdom. I thank all of you once again for joining us here this evening. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the formal program for the evening. Before we partake in food, His Holiness will lead us in silent prayer. We pray by raising our hands. You may join us in any manner you feel comfortable.
Please, silent prayer. Ameen.